Farm4Profit podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm4Profit podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm4Profit podcast.
And listeners, welcome back to the Farm for Profit podcast. This is Tanner here. I don't think I changed my shirt.
Did you need to? You stink?
No, but they're going to think I don't ever change my clothes.
We didn't do any shows before this one.
I think I wore this for our last shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. I'm
giving out our trade secret.
Austin Flowers.
Got our...
Got to go to our green room?
Yeah, green room.
Yeah.
Fluffer room or whatever they call it.
Fluffer room.
Yeah, that's what you and Vance were doing in there.
You would be the one. Oh, now they already know who our guest is.
I didn't say the last name.
Oh, okay.
Could be the vice president nominee.
Oh, yes, that's exactly who we put on our podcast. We've been political free for 5 years until now.
I just mentioned it. We don't. Maybe.
Oh.
They don't know if he's going to be the guest or not.
We could. We certainly could. How are you doing today?
I'm great. This is great. I think I feel like I'm living out your fantasy right now with a guest that you've wanted to have in your studio for a long time. You've had a little thing for this man.
I thought you were going to say man crush.
I might in my intro. That's why I was choosing my words wisely.
Oh, you're making him blush.
Yeah. So, yes, listeners, please go like, rate, review. That helps us out on all platforms, anywhere you can listen. YouTube, you can watch us. You can watch us on Spotify now. You can text Tanner, 515-207-9640.
We've had a lot of you doing that lately.
Yeah.
That's been a lot of fun. It's cool to interact with you on a one-on-one basis.
Yep. So I have no idea when this show's coming out. Probably way after Farm Progress Show. This is being recorded the week before the Farm Progress Show. If that gives you any inkling of time. But let's get into it. Give me an intro song, man.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. I feel like you're winging this one just a little bit.
I wrote it down. I didn't want to screw it up, but I don't have my teleprompter.
All right. No teleprompter, straight off of the handwritten notes.
By the way, great job on the studio. This is our first time with the new setup.
It's like looking at the
stars.
stars.
And we have no idea what we're doing. All right, here we go. Today on the Farm for Fun show, we have a friend of the podcast, a past guest of the show, but he was always on the profit side and never on the fun side. Today, he is definitely here for fun. He's on his crop tour and podcast tour from Barn Talk to Farm for Profit to the Stock Cropper Field Day. He's a podcaster, a speaker, a communicator, news host, past director of millennial engagement at Monsanto. Please welcome from St. Louis, Missouri, Tanner's man crush, Mr. Vance Crowe.
Yes.
That's
What
the
is
best
up?
opening I have ever heard.
How
man.
was the green room with Tanner?
Oh, just a little bit of fluffing before the show.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you've this is your third recording of the day, I think is what you said.
Yeah, I got to go down and see Torque at Barn Talk on my way up to the Stock Cropper, and then Tanner and I got to record the Ag Tribes report. So that
amazing.
was
Yes. That's a great new show, guys. If you have not heard that, go check out. First of all, Vance Crowe's regular podcast, but it's under the same name, right?
I just run it all under the same name, so that way nobody has to go to two different places.
That's the same way we did Farm for Fun.
So you're learning from us. That's how we do it too. Because if you had to go start a new show, then you got to go get new listeners and start all that.
Or you got to convince your old listeners to go to two places.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's just make it easy. But it's a great show. I'm going to say it's the best weekly ag news show.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. I do think that the amount of banter that you're able to have rather than just smoking right through the headlines does bring some value and a little color to it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole goal of having it as a tribes report is to say, what is the news that your people care about in your ag tribe? Because the outside world thinks that ag is one big tribe, but the reality is, no, there's dairy guys, there's cattle guys that are down in the Southwest, there's grain people. What do you guys care about? And then, what are your people thinking about this? So you guys now have both gone through this, and you guys are aces, though, so it's not really fair. For most people, it is a high-pressure thing where they're like, if you look closely on camera, they're sweating, because it's like, while you get to banter, it's still fast-paced, and I try and ask people questions that make them uncomfortable.
Yeah, I felt like we had more time than I was anticipating, so that was something that I enjoyed out of it. I felt like I overused your word tribes, but I think it's very fitting because it was definitely a lot of the perspective I shared is what's coming from our audience, what the Farm for Profit listeners are telling me or sending me or emailing us about. I feel like that was a basis for a lot of the information that I was able to share.
Do you want to know what he was going to call it?
What were you going to call it?
What was I going to call it?
As a crow flies. Wasn't it?
Oh, well, that's something somebody gave me as a name. I do. So whenever I do a Vance Crowe podcast where it's just me talking, then I call that an As the Crow Flies. So I just recently did one where I talk about how the term demons is now being thrown around a lot. Have I told you guys this?
No.
So, like, in popular culture, really kind of on maybe more like the Joe Rogans and the Tucker Carlsons and these kinds of places, you're hearing them talk about the other side as demons. And I am making the point like, hey, be careful, because the language that you use about the other side makes it so you don't have to look at them like people. You can look at them like somebody other. And so I didn't want to bring it up on a podcast that I was having to guess, because it would really just be me monologuing at somebody. So every once in a while when I see something going on in culture, I do one where I talk about something I see or think.
Because I was thinking when you started that it, I heard a lot of battling your internal demons,
Yeah.
wrestling with yourself. But you're right. As soon as you can make something not seem human, it's a lot easier to go against it.
Oh, every single genocide that's ever happened in history, you don't see them as humans. You see them as vermin or devils or,
Right.
diseased. And so to me, I always say this on my podcast, the most dangerous thing in the entire world is a human mob. And so you don't want to allow yourself to become a part of a mob. And one of the ways you do that is by not looking at individuals in their crowd, by just seeing them as all bad, and maybe they are doing bad things, but be very careful not to label all of them, because really all that's doing is giving power to a leader that's
Right.
whipping you up.
That I have heard that, and I love history podcasts. And now that you mention that, historically, you're right. There's usually I'm not going to say anti-personification, but just in a position to where you're no longer dealing with humans, you're dealing with the enemy or whatever class you're going to talk about. But also some of these professions that you wonder, how does someone do that job, like a mortician? Like, that's creepy to me. That's weird. But they're able to compartmentalize it as, this is a dead human, and I am doing a job that's going to, do a necessary portion of our current culture to get them buried or cremated or whatever it is. But
And they make bank.
they do well.
Well, you want to talk about the family business. It's even more of a family business than ag even. Like,
Yeah.
almost nobody goes into the mortician
Yes.
world from outside. But if you grew up where, like, the lower floors in your house where they did the funerals, like, you're probably going into that business as an adult.
Well, Vance, we jumped right into this. Typically on our Farm for Fun episodes, we make the guests kind of give us their background. Corey gave an introduction, but how did you get from where you were to running what you're doing
Start
now?
with Little Vance.
Little Vance was the middle child of 7 in
I
small
know that?
town
7?
central Illinois. And I had very little connection to agriculture. We were about a block away from a dairy farm. And then when I was in high school, maybe middle school, the best way to make money was to go bale hay or detassel. So I had that kind of connection with it. But the only thing I wanted in the whole world was to get out of my small town. So I went away to school. I went to Marquette University. And like every kid that doesn't really know what they want to do, but they want to go away to school, I would ask people, what do you think I should study?
Yeah.
And I was always like, well, I like talking with people. I'll go study communications.
Yeah.
And so I got a degree in public relations, and I got all the way to the end of my degree, and I take an internship.
Okay.
And I do this internship, and I was like, wait, what in the hell are you talking about? This is what we're going to do every day for the rest of our lives? Like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
So I left it. I went off and became a deckhand on a ship and started traveling around the Western Hemisphere.
How did I not know that either?
And this
You suck.
makes me feel good. I like that. I'm afraid I tell my story too much, so that's good.
No.
So I became a deckhand on this ecotourism ship, which traveled from, I got on in Vancouver and took it all the way down to the Panama Canal and through the canal. But what we would do is stop in one area and do a bunch of tours for 3 or 4 weeks in Costa Rica and Panama. And then on the other side, we'd go through the Caribbean and the islands. But this was a special ship because it was only 200 feet long, but it had a flat bottom. So it was the space between giant cruise ships and a private yacht was this thing, because it only held about 140 passengers.
Is this like the Viking River cruises that
Like,
I
it was
see?
like that, yeah. But this was for ocean-going ship, and but because it was flat-bottomed, when you reposition the ship, you got all the passengers off it, because if you hit even a little wave, this thing was like a rubber ducky in the thing, so you'd like fly around, stuff would be flying around the ship. So I did that for about a year, and then a buddy that I worked on the ship with said, "Hey, you want to make some real money flipping houses?" So this is before the housing crisis. So we bought a house and renovated it and sold it. And then I was like, this isn't for me. So I ended up joining the U.S. Peace Corps. And I moved to Kenya. My mom's always fond of telling people that the Peace Corps tested my Spanish skills that I studied so hard in college. Yeah. And then they're like, I think we're going to send you to Kenya, because I didn't study that hard in college.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors, Brandt Agricultural Products.
Brandt DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, and unmatched durability.
These dual auger carts deliver faster and more thorough cleanout with quicker turnarounds to keep your operation running smoothly. And reliable components make sure your cart is working when you are.
Lead the field with DXT carts from Brandt. Visit brandt.ca for more information.
And then I did that for a while. And I ended up getting a terrible allergy. Like my dream was to be here in the Peace Corps. When I got told I was going to Kenya, I was so dumb and so naive. I was like, oh, I wanted to go to a place that had real poverty. Because in my mind, Kenya was like the Switzerland of Africa. That's where people went on safari.
Yeah.
And then you get there and you're like, oh, these people are, they have to pull a bucket of water out of a well, and that's if they're wealthy, and they have dirt floors. Well, I was there for less than a year, actually quite a bit less than a year, and I ended up getting really sick, and it turned out I had an allergy. So broken out from head to toe in a complete rash, and it turns out I'm a good Midwestern kid, totally allergic to poison ivy, and mangoes are in the same plant family as poison ivy. So they produce urushiol in the peel of their of the skin, and so I was sitting there, terrible allergy, and I was like, man, this would be awful if I didn't have all these mangoes to eat, because I didn't know. So I came home early. Ended up the buddy that I bought a house with had bought an old wooden yacht that had a fire on it, so we took it up in Northern California and pulled it out of the water to fix it. And I took a job in public radio. So that's how I learned how to do radio, and then decided I didn't want to be up in Mendocino anymore. And so I went to graduate school. I'm trying to accelerate this because it's too...
No, I love it.
This is great.
Slow it down.
Mendocino was a wild place. Do you guys know anything about Mendocino?
No.
So Mendocino is like true Northern California. People oftentimes will say, oh, San Francisco's Northern California. Bullshit. That's Central California.
Yeah.
Mendocino is the place that, the people that think Berkeley, California is too conservative, they moved to Mendocino, right?
Okay.
And then they're living among all the loggers. So
would
it's
that
this
be like in terms of like same with Bakersfield?
Well, Bakersfield would be on the internal side of the state, so you'd be in the agriculture area.
Right,
This
but
is
they're
on the coast.
severely conservative.
Yeah, so but this would be the opposite. So the people that think Berkeley is too conservative, they're like, oh, I want to go be where my real liberal hippies are. They moved to Mendocino.
I get you what you mean.
And so, but like that's the Emerald Triangle. That's where all the weed was grown before legalization happened all over. And I ended up, I liked it there, but I knew that there's not much there. It was like moving to small town, middle of nowhere. So I went to graduate school, studied negotiations, and then went to work at the World Bank. And the World Bank was, what I was thinking was, this is where I'm finally going to get to be at a place where you can make a difference in the world, because I had always thought, the Peace Corps, the reason they weren't able to save the world is because they didn't have enough money, or public radio, they could, do great things. And I get to the World Bank and I'm like, oh, these guys have all the money. So we're going to finally be able to solve the world's problems. And that was when I came crashing into the reality that giant bureaucracies are actually pits of corruption, and it was the worst place on earth. And so I...
Not to sugarcoat it.
Not to sugarcoat it. But I want to say that as emphatically as possible, because later when I went to work at Monsanto, people thought terrible things about that place, but they thought great things about the World Bank. And I can tell you that it was actually the inverse was true. The World Bank was a terrible place. Nice people, great people, but the core mission of the World Bank, I want nothing to do with. And so I ended up meeting my wife, getting married, and I said, well, my dreams are all shattered. What are your dreams? So she had been an aerospace engineer, and she said, I don't want to do this. I want to be a physical therapist. And one of the best physical therapy programs in the country is in St. Louis. And so I said, let's move to St. Louis. So we moved there.
Aerospace engineer turned physical therapist.
Well, it makes sense when you think about aerospace is all about movement through fluids, and so is physical therapy. It's about how does your body move? Why is it that you're injured? It's because your body isn't moving in the proper way. And so she studied a very specific kind of physical therapy called movement systems integration, and became very, very good at that. She's one of the best physical therapists in the country. People fly in from all over the U.S. to when nothing else will work, they come see her. And then that's when I was living in St. Louis, and Monsanto knocked on my door and said, "Would you like to interview for this job, Director of Millennial Engagement?" And I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And I said, "Sure, I'll come interview, because who doesn't want to see inside of North Korea?"
How did they know about you? What were you doing in St. Louis?
I had done some things that had made some waves there. So I was running a communications company, and I found a company that was like, "We want to get on the map. We want to make a splash." And I'm always like, "Oh, really? Well, I've got an idea for you." That becomes a theme in my life later. But I said, "Well, hey, Bitcoin's becoming a thing. How about you pay my whole contract in Bitcoin?" And so the work that I did for them was accept payment in Bitcoin for work, and it got them huge amount of publicity because nobody was dealing in Bitcoin. So we went on radio stations, and it was written in the Business Journal. And so that kind of stuff that I was doing in St. Louis made it so when Monsanto was looking around, they were like, "Hey," somebody sent me it and said, "Hey, put in an application." And I said, "Wow, if there's a way for me to get a tour inside of North Korea, who doesn't want to take that opportunity?"
Do you still have the Bitcoin?
Yeah. I'm. It's all an indoor. It never goes out.
Did Monsanto start paying you in Bitcoin?
No, they didn't. In fact, they almost at the time they almost didn't hire me because I had an HR person come and say, "We red flagged your application because we had looked you up and it had this." And then the person that hired me, who's actually a really visionary woman, her name is Holly Butka, she said, "That's exactly what we need, is somebody that's willing to push the envelope." Because I got hired there at the time when Monsanto was being totally under assault. You're the evil, most terrible thing in the world. And so they were trying to find somebody that would go out and talk with, college kids and young people about GMOs and pesticides. So that was my job. What are you guys writing down here?
Just thoughts of, because I don't like to. We both we'll go back and forth the way we do things, and I just write like trigger words down that makes me want to ask a question later in the show, and I don't want to forget it. But yeah, Tanner's probably got completely different narrative. But
We do. We are not the same person.
so
I'm writing down grocery list.
I
need to know what I got to go to the store to get.
Here. You were a drifter of sorts.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Right?
We haven't even gotten to the end of it yet.
I know. Okay, get to the end.
Well, the end essentially is when Bear bought Monsanto. I had a mentor, a guy that had really taught me a lot. He said, "Stay there for a year." Because I was like, look, I only came to Monsanto. I didn't want to be in corporate America. This is not for me. I don't want to do PR. I was here because this is the most interesting communications problem in the face of the earth, which is we're growing food more bountifully than we ever have in the history of time. And all these people are angry and worried about where their food is coming from. So that's interesting. Bear came to me and said, "Hey, what you did here was awesome. We'd like to put you on the executive track." They got me an executive coach. They were like, "We want you to do something, but we're not going to keep going in this communications project. We're going to kind of put that aside. Do you want to go to supply chain or finance?" And I was like,
What?
"I'm not going to
Boring.
supply chain or finance." And so I ended up jumping out. And one of the things that I did was start a podcast because I was getting asked by ag groups all over the country, "Hey, you were out talking to critics. Can you come help us talk with critics?" And if you're going to go on the speaking circuit, you have to have new ideas. And the only way to get as many new ideas as I needed was to start a podcast. And the podcast led me to what I'm doing now, which are legacy interviews. So now what I'm spending most of my time doing, about 80%, is people come to my studio and we sit down together and I ask them questions about their lives so we can record them talking about their family story so that future generations can know their family history. And kind of all of those things that I did along the way helped me meet all different kinds of people and realize, like, I don't have any judgment. All I want to do is be interested in what you have to say and get you to open up and share these things. And so I spend most of my time listening to people tell their stories. And when I'm not doing that, then I get to travel around and give talks to ag about having better conversations, starting the succession conversation, negotiating, things like that.
One of my favorite episodes is the one that we did with you on negotiations. Actually, I should say 2 of my favorite episodes are on negotiations. Maybe I just like the topic in general, but We had Miles Schraner on, former FBI lead hostage negotiator, one time, and we had you the other time. And I felt like both interviews were extremely valuable to not only the way we run Farm for Profit, but the way my families run their farms, and hopefully our listeners think the same way.
It's probably a very important topic to bring up again with everything being backwards in ag. Rents are high from really high commodity prices, and now we're just the bottom's falling out, and no one wants to really come down on rent prices, and that's a tough emotional topic.
Well, in negotiations, in my view, is that it's a philosophy, or interest-based negotiations. It's a way of thinking about how do I make it so you get what you need, so you're willing to give me what I need, and it's going to help you in every situation, every single one across the. Not that everything flows perfectly for me, but I find that I have a lot less conflicts. Now it's just like, oh, let's figure out how to work out this problem.
Does that help you with the wife?
Yeah, except for, the wife's like, I know these tricks.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing here.
You've taught her too well.
I saw those textbooks.
Anyway, okay, so now let's bring this back. So what I was saying is you were a drifter, basically, right? Like, what year were you in the Peace Corps?
I don't even know, 2006 or something.
That's not that long ago. You did a lot.
Are you a millennial?
Yeah, I mean, right at the edge. So I was born in 1981, and it just depends on who's categorizing it.
So director of millennial engagement was almost not a millennial.
I always talked about, like, why do you care about millennials? What you really are saying is there's a new wave of culture coming, and that's what Monsanto wanted to surf on, was that new wave. But, yeah, I probably was a little old. I was probably almost a Gen
So would
Xer.
you have categorized yourself as a liberal, younger, chasing that? In public radio, drifting around, you were chasing that?
I'm working for an NPR station.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, of course. And
Mendocino.
everybody in the Peace Corps, you go to graduate school. This is like on the East Coast at Seton
Right.
Hall. Like, this is, yes. And, like, I was the poster child, like, liberal kid, right? Peace Corps and, you know.
But you don't think that way now, right?
No, I mean, the experience of being at the World Bank was a deeply formative experience because these people. So the World Bank, the way that it works is the UN is the voting body that says, "Hey, we want to cut illiteracy in half in Rwanda. So what are we going to do? Well, we don't have any expertise here. So let's say, what's the problem? Why aren't people in Rwanda getting better educated? Well, it's because they don't have electricity. Well, so what are we going to do? Well, we better build a hydroelectric dam. So we're going to give them money for the hydroelectric dam, but it turns out they don't have any hydroelectric engineers. So we're also going to send the engineers there. And the whole time they're doing this, every amount of money they're giving, they've got to pay out all these other people that are connected to every aspect of it, just like all government spending. Plus, they're locking these countries into debt that they're never going to be able to pay off. And then with that debt, they now start saying, hey, we'd like you to make these governmental changes to the way you govern your people. And they don't really care about the sovereignty of those people. And so a group in Washington, D.C., the World Bank is literally, you can see it from the White House.
Okay.
And it is a mechanism of the United States, really Western powers, to have a lot of control over the rest of the world.
Like, I'm cruising their website, Corey, because I know that their mission changes on a frequent basis. So they're talking about right now their biggest focus is on middle-income countries and what they can learn from America. That's on their homepage 3 times about how they're going to develop and engage the middle-income countries. So we're not talking about impoverished countries. We're talking about middle-income. How can we take them and raise their, I'm assuming, GDP to where they can repay what has been put in together?
What is the end game? They want them to be developed, so then they have to repay the debt?
So the World Bank was started after World War II, and they're called the Bretton Woods institutions. And what they were was a group of people that came together. Depends on who you ask what their intents were, but essentially it said Europe is totally annihilated. They don't have any industry here. And the last time when World War I happened, we left Germany in shambles. And then what happened? Well, if you let an inflation run wild, a country's going to have a fanatical leader. You're going to have this over and over again. So why don't we take money, pool it together, rebuild Europe, and then work from that? But once they did that and Europe got rebuilt, they were like, well, why stop now? Why don't we go to Africa, go to Central America? But I can't say whether the mission at the beginning was a good one or not. They did rebuild Europe. Europe became a powerhouse of economic. But the mission afterwards became so diffuse and so corrupted that I have no problem saying that's the most corrupt place on earth.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with certain groups trying to go help, like people in Haiti and all that kind of stuff. Like SUCAP does a lot of that kind of stuff and provides like safety homes and things like that. But like this seems like it has an ulterior motive that almost is like an allocation of funds that shouldn't be going. Like we got a lot of issues here.
Well, from the U.S.'s perspective, this is an awesome deal because they control that, right? So the U.S. Gets to appoint the president through tradition of the World Bank, and Europe gets to appoint the head of the IMF. So Christine Lagarde that you see talked about in the news, they're the ones that do the currency controls that you have to have in place before you get this World Bank loan. The U.S. is the largest donor, but they're also the one that gets to control who's doing what. It's a political body, and I went in there incredibly naive, thinking, politics is about, like, let's resolve the problem, when the reality is politics is about how do I help my small tribe of people benefit the most. And
so when I think of World Bank, I think of a bank. Like, is this doing anything with money?
No.
They're not setting interest rates, or who the hell's doing that? Who's controlling
That's the Fed.
the Fed?
Well, so they are a bank, but it's just not, they don't have depositors in the same way. Like, they don't have to make their deposits work. It's that countries donate money into this pool, and they're supposed to make a return on that. But when, a country wants to build new highway system, if they're not going to go out and buy U.S. treasuries, or if they're not going to use the regular system, they use the World Bank. And it's,
they can buy bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. You didn't expect to learn that today, did you?
No.
I haven't talked about that in years. I haven't talked about the World Bank, so this is fun.
That's good. I love that. Are you got a question, or do you want me to jump to the one that I
Go
think's
ahead.
on both of our
I was
minds?
just wanting to get out that he was a liberal.
Did you ever have long hair?
Oh, yeah. When I worked at a camp for inner city kids, yeah.
What? When was that?
Oh, in between the summer between when I graduated college and when I went to work as a deckhand. And then, of course, you're going to be cool with all the other counselors,
Sure.
and so you got to grow your hair out long.
I like that. You had long hair too, didn't you?
Oh no, not that.
Never?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
I
maybe,
mean, no, I
maybe
was
down
never
to my
ponytail
eyes.
long.
Maybe
No.
down to my eyes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't do a ponytail.
Yeah, I would be like this.
Move it out of the way.
Part your hair like this.
Yeah, I remember doing. The little head whip.
I got straight hair, so I was never any fun. It's not like I
That's
got a curl
mine.
or whatever. Just
Extremely straight.
But could you grow a beard from the time you were like 7?
oh, not quite, no. But
I still can't grow a beard. All I can grow is a mustache.
Oh, I can't even do that.
that's what we need to do. We need to. I need to go down to a mustache.
Someone
someday.
did offer for us to shave my mustache for charity. I don't know
Yeah.
what someone's willing to give for that, but
That's good.
we could do that at Farm Progress or Husker Harvest or something.
All right, I wanna attack it because to me it sounded familiar, Corey. What does Director of Millennial Engagement sound eerily similar to?
John Deere's Chief Tractor Officer.
Doesn't it?
I mean, I felt for that kid. I was like, this could have happened to me if Monsanto had decided that they were going to make publicity about this role.
You were the Chief Agronomic Officer, the Chief.
The what? The agronomic officer. What?
Slip that one in there for you. Agronomic. What would they?
It doesn't
call
sound like Chief Tractor Officer. It sounds like what John Deere wanted Chief Tractor Officer to be.
Yes.
That's
My job when I came in there, I never intended to take that job. I just wanted to go in and get a tour of Monsanto and be able to be like, I got to see inside of North Korea.
and then they offered you $250,000, and then it's like, well,
Yeah, it was the money was actually not. It was good, but it wasn't anything wild. But the thing that it was for me was like, they are literally going to let me run around here and ask anyone anything that I want, and they don't understand that if I get to stop and ask people questions, I'm going to find out what's really happening here,
Yeah.
and I don't give a if they don't like it. I don't know. Am I allowed to?
You're great.
And
good.
and so I was like, if I find out that they're evil, I'm going to go do that. And then that's actually one of the pivotal moments of my life, because this thing that I thought I was going to get to run around and uncover something, and what I uncovered was, hey, all this stuff that you thought you knew, you were wrong about. And what does that change in your whole worldview if you thought like, well, modern ag, everybody kind of already knows that's bad and that they do these terrible things, and you have that flipped on its head. Now all of a sudden, everything that you thought you knew, you're open to looking at, and it made me a much, much more open person.
Made you an open. Okay. So you thought you were going to get paid to basically go in and unearth.
What everybody wanted you to unearth.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
you were
I thought they
gonna
were
whistle
insane.
blow and,
yeah, I
you know,
thought they
blow
were
it off.
totally insane for hiring me. It was actually a really brilliant move because then when I went out to do stuff, I was not interested in doing the PR-ish things, right? We had a PR firm that was like, Vance, we're so glad you're here. We've been waiting. We have a budget for you. And now what we want you to do with this budget is you get to choose, should we sponsor this conference or this one or this group of college kids? And then we'll get a banner and you can have 5 minutes on the stage. And I was like, look, if the world views you as North Korea, it doesn't matter how beautiful the beaches look on your billboards. Nobody's coming there. So I gave them all the money back and said, I'm not going to spend any money on this. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say if there's a group out there that wants me to come talk to you, then if you buy my plane ticket, I'll fly and go talk to any group that's out there. And so I started getting invited to all kinds of places and talking to activists and talking to people that were scared. And this is what made a huge difference, that they were, for the first time in their lives, Monsanto wasn't something they saw in a documentary.
It was a person.
It was a person. It was a person that had the same problems, the same questions that they did. And I approached it with the feeling of, look, if you know something that I don't know about what they're doing that's evil, I want to know. But let me tell you, a bunch of the questions that I thought I had, they actually have pretty good answers for. So why don't I share with you what I know, and you tell me if you know something different. And I got to travel all over the U.S. and Canada and Europe talking about it.
So when you go talk somewhere, you talk for an hour, right? And you learned all this over probably a course of days, weeks, months. Were you able to see that transition in these people that probably came in opposing that? Were you able to do that in an hour?
Yeah, I mean, so what I did, so the reason I took the job was the woman that hired me, Holly, said, we got all the way to this end of interviews, and she comes back into the room and she says, do you have any questions for me? I'm like, how are you going to train a person to be the director of millennial engagement? It's the most hated company in the world. How are you going to teach somebody how to do that? And the whole time I had been doing the interviews, I had 7 panels of interviews. The whole time they would ask me, what's your preferred management style? And I'd be like, I like to show up to work early. Why are you guys dumping all these pesticides into the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah.
And then I'd make them answer, right? And then they'd ask me another question, like, how do you improve on your work process? And I'd give them an answer, and then I'd be like, why are you guys causing Indian farmers to commit suicide? And so I get so their impression.
You literally
of me,
went in there with the "there's nothing to lose" mentality.
I don't know if you've ever done a job interview for a job you don't want. It's as much fun as you
It
can
is
possibly
fun.
have.
That is very fun.
Because you're like, I don't care what you think of this. You're stuck with me for an hour. And so I got all the way done, and I think they were like, whoa, this guy asked all kinds of questions. So Holly, when I asked her, how are you going to train this person? She said, well, since you've been so curious, what I think I'd do is write a list of 50 people from throughout the company, geneticists, breeders, farmers, attorneys. Have you sit down and talk with them. And then when you're done with that list of 50 people, then you and I will sit down and we'll talk again, and I'll figure out what you do and don't know, and I'll write another list of 50 people. And so a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, now I'm really going to get to go discover what they're doing that's evil.
She's like, this is what I wanted.
And then really what I found out was the difference of opinion. And then when I went to go speak about it, now I had to figure out, if I view something completely differently than you, how do I at least get you to loosen your grip on things? And I was never there like, I'm going to change your mind. I was like, I'm going to find out if you know something I don't. So if there's a question I should be asking these guys, and I just want to make it so you're not hostile. You like sit here and view it as an honest opportunity to talk, and it went great.
How did you do that?
Well, your mug's making me think about the time when I failed at the very first time I ever did it, which was, I maybe have told you guys this story before, so stop me if I have. But the first talk I ever got invited to was an ag program at Iowa State. And
Really?
They were like, yeah, we have a sustainable program. It's in the graduate school. Will you come and talk? And I was like, sure. So I get the presentation that the PR firm has given me that's all been approved, and they've message tested and everything. And I'm just about to go into this program, and I talked to the buddy of mine that before I had gotten the job, who I had known for a long time, and he was like, look, if you can't win over the ag kids at Iowa State, you should quit your job.
Right.
Like, this is like, you're going to
That should be a chip shot, yeah.
And so I walk in there, and like, it's a stadium-style room.
Yep.
And I walk in, I'm like, you kids don't look like the ag kids that I know, but, maybe they're different. I don't know. So I go through this presentation, and it's a 2-hour class. And so I'm thinking, all I want to do is get to Q&A. This is going to be so fun. I'm playing with the home team, right?
Yeah.
So I go through this presentation. We're all here to feed the world, and we've got to do GMOs, and we all know that bing, 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 bing. So I get through this 45-minute, hour-long presentation in 15 minutes. So I have an hour and 45 minutes of Q&A. So I think, here we go. This is going to be fun. And I say, are there any questions? And a woman all the way at the top, back row, raises her arms straight up in the air like this.
You're like, I knew it. As soon as
Yes, you there. Do you have a question? And she goes, I don't believe a word out of your mouth.
Oh, boy.
And the whole room starts clapping and cheering.
Oh, man.
And I was like, what do you do now? And what I learned from that experience was if you come in there with something flashy and shiny and it's not authentic and it's all the message tested stuff, people smell that out immediately. So from then on, I after that shellacking, I ended up just starting to come in and be like, hey guys, this is what I thought about modern ag. This is what I've learned so far. And now if you guys know something I don't know, tell me about it. And it would always start a dialogue that went really, really well.
Do you remember what wing of the college that was?
Well, it turns out.
NREM.
And now a quick word from one of our sponsors, Brandt Agricultural Products.
Reach farther and work smarter with Brandt XT grain carts.
Unloading grain has never been easier with unmatched auger visibility, 4-direction spout control, and complete grain tank cleanout. So you can unload fast and fill the truck evenly, worry-free.
Lead the field and keep your combines moving with the XT grain carts from Brandt.
Visit brandt.ca for more information.
It was one of the programs at Ag that broke away from the Ag school and floated to the left side of campus.
Natural Resources Ecology and Management. Something probably.
I was at a farm managers conference thing, and one time I told this story, and a guy was in there. He's like, "I was in that room. I saw that. That happened." and so I don't remember the name of the program, but it was a special program that was clearly all the people that hate modern ag, and it was. I'm glad it happened. It was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Right.
Oh, man. What an awakening.
I think it's anytime, though, you can get face-to-face with people, maybe not when you're in that setting, but, like, even if they completely oppose you, I feel like you can always find middle ground, right? It's so much better in person talking than someone sitting behind a computer screen just typing, like, you are the demon, you are the devil. Like, oh, my gosh.
Well, and when I would be there, I had spent hours upon hours studying this, learning this, trying things out, and a person that had really strong feelings about Monsanto, they had those strong feelings because they watched a documentary and maybe they read a book.
Yeah.
And the reason they feel so strongly is the exact same thing that makes them think I am the devil himself in front of them. So when they take that microphone, they're going like this. They're shaking.
Yeah.
And so if the devil doesn't treat you, like, rah, I'm going to get you, and is like, no, go ahead. And I think what you're trying to say is this, and is this your complaint?
Yeah.
And you open up their argument and you make it better. Suddenly they're like, all right, now I'm more open to whatever it is that you had to say.
What was the...
That's the same thing to work in family discussions. We talk about intergenerational, if dad doesn't let me do something, but if you can open up your idea and get them to see, figure out why they don't want to implement it, if it's fear or finance or whatever it is, if you can open that up a little bit, it gets that conversation propelled and that relationship builds and trust builds and the whole aspect. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right. I mean, I want to know what was the main catalyst that made people hate Monsanto? Was it the one documentary?
No, I mean, so...
Was it Food Inc.?
So what happened, in my opinion, is that GMOs came on the market and nobody really knew very much about them. And Monsanto and the other ag companies said, we're not selling these to consumers. Why would we go talk about it? We're just selling them to producers. And when that happened, there were certain businesses that became threatened by that, right? If you are, for example, using now chemistry to be able to knock out all that weed pressure, well, now you don't need to drive a giant stake into the ground and rip your ground open, which means you're not burning as much fuel. You don't need as big of a tractor. And so one system, that chemical system, started winning. The other side, whatever that other side is, decided no, we don't like that very much. This is really hurting us. So they started donating to groups that I think were closer aligned to the Joker, like that they didn't fully understand that once you fund these groups, they're going to do things that you couldn't possibly understand to agriculture. And so the anti-GMO movement built up. But once that money went away, once the activists, for example, found out that they couldn't make money off of fighting GMOs anymore because the non-GMO label had become ubiquitous, they moved to going to glyphosate. And now, do you hear anybody being worried about GMOs? Virtually none, right? It's because those people didn't tell people what to think. They told people what to think about. And so people were like, there's something to know because there's something hidden in here. And just like if I handed you that drink and kept looking at it and then looking up at you and then looking down at the drink and then looking at you, you'd be like, is there something in here?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just not going to take a chance. I'm just going to not drink that. And all that fear is something that's very easy to fund and made it so Monsanto was caught off guard and their enemies made money off the fact that
I will say I will echo. I have not seen a thing about GMOs for a long time, but I have seen paid ads on TikTok and Instagram for Roundup.
It's because that's
paid
where
actors.
the money is. So, in my opinion, people should know this. There are groups that get together in conference centers in Las Vegas, in New York, and what they're doing is they hold a conference just for class action lawsuits. So just like you walk up and down at a Farm Progress show or a Commodity Classic and you can see all these booths, what the people in these booths are doing is, hey, if you put in $100,000 or $1 million, you can buy shares into my class action lawsuit about asbestos or glyphosate or pick your whatever. This is what we have as evidence. This is how many people we've signed up for the case.
Yeah.
But if we get your money, we're going to buy billboards and late night to ads, and we're going to go get more clients. And your $100,000 could turn into $1 billion settlement, of which you'll now quadruple your money. And people should be aware that that this is what's going on, and all those late night ads and stuff like that. That's all a part of this system that picked apart.
Which there's got to be a percentage that are legit, right? Like that of like company came out and completely wrong, swindled people, and screwed their life up.
I don't know. Did you put your name on that class action lawsuit for Roundup or for whatever
No,
it was?
Not for Roundup.
Yeah, and we did and never saw a dime.
Huh.
Just depends on which one. I mean, I'm with you, because the truth of the matter is large corporations have a lot of money and their lawyers can just bombard you. And if you're just a regular, it's not even David and Goliath, it's Goliath and the gnat.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a mechanism that makes it so you can be on equal footing with a corporation. So you can't get rid of that ability to fight that way. But at the same time, as soon as you build something into the system, there's parasites that come along.
Well,
and
and the
take
fact that
advantage
they
of
have
it.
a conference for it, like, oh, I'm going to go dabble into these, class actions. Like, oh, that's got a pretty good return, and it's like, no,
The
it should
probability
almost-
of winning
it
here.
should- this is the wrong word. Organically, come from an actual issue of like, holy cow, I'm connecting these dots of these people around the country are having issues with, and have that common denominator of like, yep, they created this asbestos that,
And
non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I feel like I should say this, but like I've been around long enough in a bunch of these different positions to know that the people at the World Bank, that the people doing this class action lawsuit, 99% of them are doing it because they have a righteous belief about it. They have an understanding, hey, what I am doing is good, and there's just it just takes a small number of people to be pulling the value out of that by cheating. And so, but the baddies are out there. The baddies will take advantage of the people that think they're doing good.
Okay, so going back to your role as director of millennial engagement, you turn to PR on their heads, saying, I don't want your money. I'm going to go do these talks. How did they determine you were successful?
That's a great question. So what happened was I started saying, like, look, we need to find a way to say, how do we know if you are getting ideas out into culture? And whatever metrics they were using, I was not interested in. What I decided was a good metric was minutes of attention. And so what we would do is say, like, if, let's say, you're on a podcast for 30 minutes and it's watched by 100 people. Well, that's, just do the math on it. So what this gave me a great advantage, because you could also then take that number and divide it by how much did it cost for you to get those minutes of attention. So the PR firm said, hey, the way that we're going to get lots and lots of attention is we're going to write and produce an ad, and we're going to run it on the Super Bowl. And that's expensive, right?
Yeah.
And you're only hitting somebody that's like kind of half watching, and if it's not a funny commercial, everybody's going to get their buffalo dip, right?
Yep.
So they did like a 30-second ad, and they could multiply it. I instead went out and said, all right, I think Reddit is awesome. And this is way before corporations got on Reddit. And I found a scientist way down deep in the company that was one of those grumpy guys that was like not a corporate guy, but who actually had invented BT cotton. His name was Fred Perlak.
Wow.
And I worked with him, and I was like, hey, let me show you Reddit. And he studied it for a couple weeks, and then we did a practice Reddit where I had a bunch of other millennials chatting him questions and having him type out answers. And then we put him in there, and he did a science AMA. It was the second highest rated second AMA in the history of Reddit on the science thread, second only to Stephen Hawking. And we beat the Super Bowl ad in minutes of attention because we could see what was the average amount of time people spent on this and how many people watched it. And I more than tripled what they had done on the Super Bowl ad, only my cost was $0. And so once I did that, Monsanto is a national tragedy that the company is no longer here. But once I did that, they were like, okay, we want to see what else this experiment can do. And so that's when I started doing all kinds of very different out there things and yeah, trying to push the envelope.
Where do you even go from there?
Oh, I can go a lot of different ways. He said man crush in the introduction, but I've had immense respect from you from the first time we connected. I mean, you have a perspective on life, problems, agriculture, corporate business that a lot of people don't have. You've got the ability to ask questions in a very unique way, and I didn't realize it stemmed clear back to forever. You've just always been a curious person himself. I just know that we've had a very strong partner, have and will have in John Deere, and I like Rex as the CTO as an individual. Rex is a very cool dude. We got to spend time with him at the John Deere Classic, and we expressed our concerns on the podcast for how Ag had treated him coming into his role. But boy, I almost think a mentorship with Vance would be extremely valuable.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to echo that it was not Rex's fault. It was John Deere's fault. We love John Deere. They just portrayed what they wanted in this, and that's what everyone felt like they had their backs turned on him because the chief tractor officer got to know. I mean, he didn't know a thing about tractors.
Director of Gen Z Engagement would have
should have been
a great title.
Or like I've seen a lot of people like they should have just called someone that makes TikToks for John Deere.
The chief TikTok officer.
Yeah.
That makes me think I heard a line the other day. It's definitely not mine. Is most conflict is over unmet expectations, and that's what happened there. People had expectations, and they were unmet on a whole bunch of different sides. And so it's like, if they had managed that expectation, then they wouldn't have had that, and he wouldn't have had an uphill climb. But, like, he clearly has talent. He clearly has something to add to the whole paradigm. And, who knows? The people that get stuck in a position like that probably changed his life. But even if it was painful, it probably made him go like, this is a live wire. Like, I actually, what I am doing has the potential to matter.
If he's got half the personality that you do, absolutely.
Well, he can laugh his way all the way to the bank. I mean, I read the fine print of that because I applied for it. It was $190,000 up to $190,000. He had to perform $190,000.
I mean, it was a great campaign. I don't have any John Deere implements or anything at my house, and I'm sitting there fanning the flames for Corey, like go, 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 which is spreading it out to thousands and thousands of people to hear about John Deere. It was a brilliant idea.
I think a lot of people don't realize that in ag, that John Deere is a much larger than just your combine and tractor and planter. Like, there is bulldozers and excavators and equipment that's logging and all your turf on golf courses. And, I mean, it is a worldwide company. And now it's a software company. It's not just hardware of your tractors. I mean,
and a finance company.
And
right?
a finance.
That's a huge finance company.
It's like people don't understand that. Like, so they're not telling our story for ag,
It's just great when you get to meet the people. Like you said, the people inside the World Bank, there's awesome people over the last 3 years we've connected with that you can see why they just love working there. They literally bleed green. They really enjoy that position. There's others that are there because it's a job. And maybe some with some cynical nature.
Did you meet any peers that were in a similar position when you were the director of millennial engagement for other companies?
Not for other companies. At Monsanto, like I was one of several people that were hired. I had a counterpart named Val Bays, who was the STEM outreach person, and she was literally the most creative teacher-oriented person. So her job was to go work with teachers to teach them how to do lessons. And like, you know how people do ag in the classroom?
Oh, yeah.
This was like ag in the classroom, like turned up to an 11. And that was a very, very effective way of getting your message out to teachers. And I think the most important way that ag can get ideas out into the broader public is definitely through the schools and supporting ag teachers.
So is this what you meant by your phrase earlier that said, I've got an idea, which is a common thread throughout your entire life?
Well, I was saying I like to push the envelope. Like, oh, you guys want to push the envelope. So the president of the American Farm Bureau, the story I was referencing, was Zippy Duvall when I was in the last year and a half of being director of millennial engagement. And he and I had gotten to know each other over a couple of different times. And at one point he says to me, hey, I'm here to be president because I want to change things, right? Like, I'm not here because I need the salary. I don't really want to live in Washington, D.C. So you've been pushing the envelope. What do you think? If I wanted to have something kind of edgy at the American Farm Bureau conference, what should I do? Now, when I say this name, everyone's going to know the name. But at the time, no one knew who this was. But I said, yeah, I got an idea somebody you can bring. Have you ever heard of Jordan Peterson?
Ah.
And so he was like, no. So I sent him some videos. Now, at the same time, I had been sending executives at Monsanto Jordan Peterson videos, and they loved it too. So when this came together and I said, hey, guys, I got to talk to the president of the American Farm Bureau. He wants us to sponsor a thing. You guys have been seeing this Jordan Peterson guy. What if we see if he can do it? And at the time, it cost literally nothing to bring him. And I got to fly up to Toronto and go meet him at his house and say, hey, Farm Bureau wants to have something that's on the edge. And the thing that I see is that people are sending their kids away to college. And those kids leave the farm and they come back. And farmers would tell me this all the time. My kids either come back and say one of two things. They either say, my kid was pushed back to the ag school and he could never leave because every time he went to literature or history, he was told how bad family farming was, so he just stayed on the ag campus. Or they leave the farm, go to school, they come back and they hate me. And they hate everything that we do and they hate everything that we stand for, so what should we do? And I was like, you know this world. Why don't you come tell the farmers what they should do with their kids about college in this thing?
Yeah.
Well, he came. And the day before, Slate magazine and a bunch of people found out we were doing this, and it went everywhere. Like, why is Monsanto courting the belle of the alt-right, the Nazi sympathizers, da-da-da-da. So it was this huge deal. And Monsanto, to its credit, was like, we've gone this far. Let's go the rest of the way. But he came and gave a talk, and he just used the most acidic, volatile things that he possibly could. It was really interesting, but it made for a very, very, people in my own company were like, why are you bringing this person? Why'd you bring us all this heat? So I pushed the envelope a little too far there.
Mm-hmm.
So do you still have access to Jordan Peterson?
When I've gone to the in-person things and we know each other and I have his email. I don't use it. He kind of moved on to a different thing. I'm not as interested in it anymore.
I think he's still pretty interesting. I mean, he's got some great opinions, I guess, on the whole COVID thing and all that. You hear him on frickin' Joe Rogan all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's waiting for my phone call. I think he'd be like, yeah, I vaguely remember this guy from Monsanto once, but I got to go to his house. It was pretty cool.
So what was the downfall of your role, or how did you get out of that, and the downfall of what you see as Monsanto?
I got out of the role because the opportunity was, do you want to go to supply chain or finance? And I said no. And they said, okay, well, here's what you should do. Apply for this job, and if you don't get it, then we can give you a severance package. And I was like, well, if I take the severance package, what do I have to sign? Do I have to sign something? Because everybody I knew that took one said they signed a thing that said you'll never say anything negative about Monsanto or Bayer, because if you do, you'll get all that money clawed back and sued. And so I was like, I'm not going to sign anything. So if that means I can't take any money, so be it. But that way, for the rest of my life, if I'm on a podcast right now, nobody has any questions, about like if this guy agrees with Monsanto or not. It's totally up to me. So that's how I ended up leaving. We left on a great relationship. I still talk to a lot of people at Bayer. They've done work with me. Like no issues, no problem. Good company.
You said it was a national tragedy that Monsanto's not a company anymore.
Well, that was one of the most innovative companies in the United States. They like not just glyphosate, but how they came up with how to sell it and how they structured different research and innovation programs. And so when Bayer bought Monsanto, one of the contingencies that all these countries around the world, because it wasn't just the United States that said, is this a collusion or is this a trust? Is this a monopoly? So they had to go around to all over Europe, Russia, China, all these places. And these countries, what they would say is, yeah, we'll let it go through if you will build a GMO site in our country and give us, the genetic engineering that you've been doing. Give us access to germplasm that we've never had. Now, the people selling the company had a whole bunch of stock. And so they said, great, I'm going to get paid really well for this. I don't mind giving that away. But as a national strategy for making sure you have food sovereignty, I don't think that was a good thing. And I think when we look around at how many countries or how many companies are now in agriculture, it's not, nobody benefits from there being fewer seed companies. And I think that we lost the innovation. It's definitely centralized ag, and we gave away a lot of our intellectual value to these other countries.
I would agree with that. And you're giving that technology to these countries that could never grow that the GMOs, the drought tolerance and the bug tolerance and all that kind of stuff. Like, they could never grow a crop there. And now look, we're growing a commodity that everyone can frickin' grow, and it's worth nothing.
Well, and like, the other side of me says, well, maybe it's good because, more food is better for everyone if you can feed the world. But the reality is, if you're always in a competitive market, and we're seeing the consequence of having everybody be able to grow a lot of corn, a lot of soy.
I saw something the other day that said the food insecurity is not that we don't grow enough food. It's that we don't grow enough food where the people who have the insecurities are at. It's the transportation. It's how do you get it to them effectively, cost effectively, ultimately, and that's the struggle. The areas that are impoverished and are struggling with food don't have the climate or the appropriate soils or whatever it is to grow the food that they need.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with just blatant corruption. I think that the countries that are not able to grow food, they have people that want to grow it. They have, the desire, the work ethic, everything. It's just that the people at the top are sucking so much out. I'll tell you one of the things, I'll see what you guys think of this. I want to see who is the first ag company that finally comes around and acknowledges feed the world not only isn't going to work as a slogan, it's because our population is collapsing. It's not, we're going to have huge numbers of people. Like, we're actually going to have way fewer people.
I have heard mention, never publicly, but like feed, what was it, 50 billion by, or well, no, 10
like 9 billion, 10 billion,
by 2050.
Saying,
yeah. And you haven't seen that on any promotions, any marketing lately. And I've heard it in the back channels like, we don't have to do that.
It's because, we're having a population collapse, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing replacement rate. But what is the new ag thing going to be for why we need to grow, just keep increasing yield?
It's not fence row to fence row anymore. It's not.
But when you go through...
we talked about it today. It's going to be climate smart agriculture, which is going to decrease yield.
Right. Artificially decrease yield by it's... the oil companies have benefited the most by making our cars less fuel efficient by having all these catalytic converters and things.
Yeah.
You said you're one of 7?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the last time I've heard anyone that had over a family of 5.
Wasn't Bergen Mennonite was like 14 kids or something like that?
Yeah, but that's Mennonite. But if you see someone that has 4 or 5 kids now, you're like, you're batshit crazy.
Yes.
Like what? You just want to just be a baby factory? That's all you do. Like, you can't even afford to have your wife stay home and raise those kids anymore with the cost of everything right now.
Well, I do these legacy interviews, and I get to hear people talking about their lives and what they think about what happened and how they did things. And one thing that I hear a lot, and it actually kind of like, pierces into my heart, where it's like they're like, yeah, you say you can't afford kids because you want a lifestyle that's at this level. But when we had kids, we didn't have that. We did a lot more shopping at Goodwill. We did a lot more of this thing and that thing. And I hear it a lot with people that had 5 kids or 6 kids.
Yeah.
And now that I have 2 kids and how hard it was to get them, I realize, right, the only real wealth you have in life is your family.
Right.
That's it. Like, it's not the money in your bank account that's going to make you you need a certain amount to be stable and to be able to provide as a father or as parents. But, like, the wealth that you're going to have when you're 60 or 70 is how many grandkids sit around and want to talk with you or want to hear you or want you to fix some toy that they have or show you how to run the tractor. That's wealth.
Yeah. I wanted to have more.
What happened?
And my wife's got type 1 diabetes, and so the first kid was okay, and the second one was pretty rough on her. You already automatically got to go to the high risk, and it was just tough. They got to induce you and all that, and like her body was not having it on the second one, and she's like, "No, I'm done after 2." And I was like, I'd like to have one more, but love her too.
We had to do IVF to have our 2 kids, and man, that was the thing that I always tell young kids now, young guys, particularly when they get married, like, hey, I waited 10 years. My wife and I are having a great time. We go on trips. We do all this stuff. And I didn't realize, like, oh, wait, you could get to a point where you say the clock is running out and this may not happen. I had the Peter Pan ideology of a lefty kid.
I mean, that is in our culture, though. Like, there are so many 30-plus-year-olds I know that are still living that single life and almost not even trying anymore because they're like, I'll just find someone later. I mean, do you see that?
Yeah,
I got several friends that aren't married yet or aren't going to get married or will later in life and probably never have kids.
But I think this has to do with the culture. When I talk to these people about legacy interviews and you say, hey, to the woman, what did you want to be when you grew up? She was like, I didn't care. There were 3 options. I could be a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. And what I really wanted to be was a mom. And even the women that were going to school to get a law degree or to go on and get higher education, they would basically say, like, I was doing this, but I wanted to be a mom. But we went through, remember when we were in school, how much anti-pregnancy stuff there was in school? Like, you got to carry around this baby, and if you get pregnant in high school, life over.
Yeah,
everything
to carry an egg, and
yeah,
if you cracked the egg, you were a bad parent.
Yeah.
And you just,
I mean, that is straight up indoctrination to say, hey, what we'd rather you do as a country is put, I heard it said the other day, this is not my line, but like, hey, women, they're almost magical. Like, they can produce another human being inside of them, but you can only do it for these years, these very short years, like, 18, maybe a little younger than that, till 35. And then the magic goes away and you can't do it anymore. But what you really should be doing during those years is coming in and working 50 weeks a year and get 2 weeks off for vacation. And we're going to give you this great salary instead of doing magic. Mm-hmm. And the reality is what we should have been telling women is like, this is the most magical thing you can do. Let's try and do this. But the consequence in our economy when we added all these women to telling them they needed to get jobs and they needed to, this would be the only way they'd be satisfied, is we doubled the workforce and lowered the value of labor. And this has been bad for all of us except
that was
for
the comment I was getting ready to say, is the number of women that we know that would prefer to not work outside of the home and be a mother, the number of fathers that would prefer to be fathers instead of work outside of the home, and you can't because we're now in a dual income household or dual income economy that you both have to work just to pay the bills. You don't get ahead if only one of you works, and that's sometimes really pushing ends to make sure everything meets.
Some people got to have podcasts on the side.
Everybody at this table to make ends meet.
Yeah. That's right. Man. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but exactly. I was just going back to my high school days of home ec. We don't have home ec anymore, but
oh yeah, sex ed.
Yeah, home ec. You learned everything from I could stitch a pillow to I had to carry a baby around to I had to write a check and balance a checkbook and all these things that you learned in home ec. They don't have that anymore.
Yeah, home ec is something people in legacy interviews talk about a lot. And like, if you want to hear a good conversation, ask your mom what home ec was all about, because you got like the tail end. Like they used to do hardcore. Like, hey, you had to learn how to sew a dress, and you had to learn how to do all like actual canning where they're doing real pressure.
yeah.
Like they had to do legit hard things because we weren't outsourcing all of this, domestic chores to the grocery store or to the laundry, whatever that is. People had to do it in their home. They had to teach them.
Yeah.
Put a condom on a banana.
I did a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, that is pretty good.
I sewed a pillow. I remember that.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting as, I was talking with one of the older guys on the farm, my in-laws that they hire, and, he was told that his generation would never make it from his parents and his parents' friends. And he said the same thing to his kids, that their generation would never make it. And they're saying the same thing about the kids now in school, that, well, they're never going to amount to anything. And we've all been okay. The world looks different. It's always going to look different. But ultimately, we all get through life fine.
We find a way.
Yeah.
Sure doesn't feel like it sometimes. Like it's going to happen. And what is the future for you? You got this new ag tribes report. You got to keep going. Like you can stay in that realm of podcasts.
Yeah, I mean the podcast. So the legacy interviews, what I came to realize is it's very difficult for me to be like, I'm going to go advertise to talk about legacy interviews, because it's an expensive thing for people to get. And so the only way they're going to get it is if they know me and they trust me and they get to find out more about me. And so the way that happens is people either hear me give talks or they learned about me on the Vance Crowe podcast. And so I was like, look, I looked at the numbers very clear. 80% of my clients are from ag. And so if I can reach out and get to know more people in ag by producing a podcast that they find valuable, then more people get to know what I'm doing and what Legacy Interviews is. And Legacy Interviews is the work that I'm doing that's been, the most deeply valuable that I'm adding, because helping families pass down those family stories is of deep importance. And I think it's the thing that allows agriculture to preserve probably the most valuable thing that it has, which is agriculture is the part of our country that still holds the values that made us who we were. And there's a lot that those people tell me in legacy interviews about being involved in the community, about raising kids, about how to handle stressful, bad situations. They're passing on to their family that if it doesn't get passed on, it won't get passed on, and we'll lose that part of our culture. And I think so. This work has been really something really meaningful to me.
Who's the 20%?
People in a lot of my friends, my neighbors, like a lot of people in St. Louis.
I didn't know if you saw like a bunch of like similar like careers that kind of go along. You said like morticians are like a very
so it's a good point. So a lot of times the families that do this are often when they have multi-generational businesses. So I did a bunch of people that were grain elevator owners. I also did a series of people that were floor installers, because there were a couple of family businesses. They all heard about it. They all knew about it, so they wanted to do it. But, I mean, outside of that, it's my neighbors find out, and they're like, hey, my dad's not going to be around forever. My kids aren't going to know him. If I want my kids to understand me, they got to understand my dad, so will you do this interview? And that's been really neat, to interview the parents of my neighbors. Now you know your neighbor so much better.
Yeah.
And, you just have a much better relationship.
You don't yell when they start mowing the yard at 8 o'clock at night, because you
He's
understand.
just doing it to
Is
try
that
and
bad?
impress his father after all that,
I got to have it mowed. He's showing up tomorrow morning. If my grass ain't cut, Dad's going to be all over me.
Yeah.
That's good. I have 2 questions. I have 3 questions left. I have 2 for Vance and 1 for you.
Oh.
What do you got left?
I got a few.
Okay. How do you like sitting in my chair?
I don't.
I don't like sitting in yours either.
It's too prim and proper.
I've
this
I can't
studio
lean back.
is
I have been-
amazing, guys.
I've been doing this.
Yeah, we just
the
put it
whole
together
show.
yesterday.
This is annoying. I don't know how I can't sit still. This just.
Because I like multiple positions, and I like to lean back and really get this angle at you, and
We switched chairs because this is where I sat when Vance and I did Ag Tribes, and I wanted my chair because I just.
yeah.
Oh.
I feel like I got a good posture.
I feel shorter when you sit in my chair.
Is that good?
No, I don't like being shorter.
I'm taller. That means I'm taller. Okay.
There you go.
That was the one thing you had for me?
That was my question for you. I want to know, since you're on the podcast tour today and your third podcast stop, what was the best question that Torque asked you today?
See, I got to cross this off my list.
Oh, you had it on yours too? Oh.
Yeah.
Torque is a great interviewer, and so you guys know, like, I think Bitcoin is like a deeply important technology, but normally I'm the one pushing that conversation on to other people that are like, all right, I guess we're going to talk about Bitcoin again because Vance wants to.
Yeah.
But Torque had some very interesting questions about Bitcoin, and what I loved about them was that they were very simple. And I think people oftentimes, when they start talking about Bitcoin, they have like, let me ask you this complicated question. And his was just like very down to earth. And I thought, like, it takes a humble person. You guys are really good at it. It takes a humble person to ask a simple question. And a simple question is going to get you the most beautiful answer. Complicated questions are often way more about the host than they are about the guest. And I was really impressed with the way he did. I don't know if you guys met Sawyer.
We've met him at the World Pork.
So
Expo?
he's this hulking dude, right?
Oh,
you
yeah,
meet
he's
him
a
and you're like,
freaking beast.
I
of a
really
man.
wish I was that healthy. And
It's
fit.
like, how did you come from Torque? You know, like you got this and you got this and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I like how you added loins in there. You couldn't just say, how did you come from
it's the
Torque?
fruit of the loins of Torque.
Well, so Sawyer was like also very like listening, and then he'd ask you some very simple but deep question. And I really felt like those two guys, for being a father-son duo, have something really good going on there.
I love my dad and I love the relationship we have, but I do find myself envying, like, man, that is so cool. Like, how many people could say they have a podcast with their dad? They work, you know. Like,
And that they're both better podcasters because of the other one. That
oh
doesn't
my
happen.
God.
Yeah.
You do call me daddy every once in a while.
This is different than Farm4Profit. This is very
Here
different.
we go.
If I didn't say it, you were going to say it.
Probably.
Yes. Okay, so that was my one question. What
I
do
mean,
you got?
mine was I had Barn Talk misses on here. I just wanted to get what did they miss about you?
Well, I mean,
They didn't know that he was a deckhand.
nobody ever asks me about the World Bank, and that's something that, like, I think if more people knew or understood what that was all about, they would be like, wait, what in the fuck are you talking about? And so you guys hit on that, but I mean, to your credit, like, literally no one has asked me about that.
Here we go. In ag, we find a lot of farmers, their hobby is farming. We're podcasters. Our hobby is podcasting. Like, we have to have something to retire to at some point or go do. What's your hobbies? What do you do when you're not podcasting?
I mean,
Not
I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so hobbies are like a long lost.
Right, but eventually they're going to be 10 and, you know, whatever. Like, you got to go do something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, probably podcasting. I could probably do legacy interviews as long as I have breath in my lungs and I can keep the.
So you're like a
business going.
farmer.
Like, yeah.
You are like a farmer.
Probably.
See, I think we have to find something. Like, we have to go skiing on a mountain or, you know, go travel the world or something. Like, otherwise we're just going to become these crotchety old podcasters that's all we do.
And we don't turn it over to the next generation of podcasters.
I think that is true, right? The passing down. In fact, I talk about this all the time at legacy interviews. A few weeks after somebody gets done with an interview, I'll get a call from their son, and they'll be like, "You are not going to believe this. Dad just took his first vacation in 40 years," or "Mom finally said she's going to move off the farm and finally move in with her sister that she's always wanted to do." And for a long time, I thought about this, like, what is going on? And I realized when people get a chance to reflect on their lives, when they get a chance to be like, hey, this is the bullshit that we went through. This is the hardship we did. Oh, and we did it, right? Like, they look back and they say, remember that pregnancy? Remember how hard that was? Remember that when we had, you know, the family and all this drama was going on? But when you're living it, you get done with one crisis and you move to the next crisis and the next one and the next one and the next one. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the big reasons people don't let go of the reins is because they haven't had a chance to sit down and tell their stories, which is the role of a grandchild, is to ask granddad or grandma all these questions so that way they can be like, oh, I'm going to go from being this productive to-do person to being the wise person, and I don't need to be in charge. But that's why I'm always telling people, if you don't do it with legacy interviews, do it yourself. The first step towards succession planning isn't about, hey, how are you going to hand down the farm? It's going to be, how did you do this? What should we know? Tell me about a time when you got hurt. What was the way you handled this problem? And people you'll watch the magic as they let it go because they've never actually sat down and thought about it. Just like I hadn't thought about the World Bank until you guys asked me about it.
That is so good. I do think that reflection freaking triggers that. And if you don't have 7 grandkids, you only have 1 or 2, those grandkids might have been duds and not asked the right questions.
Or if you're only seeing the grandkids on FaceTime.
Right.
You're
I was
never
going to say,
do that.
families are so much further spread apart now than they ever used to be.
Which technology's great. Glad that you have that.
But the way grandma tells you about, the thing that happened to her when she was a little kid is you're shaving carrots and she cuts her hand and now we got to go handle this. And now we're telling about, don't worry, I did that too. And
right.
It's not happening. And so if it's not going to happen, you've got to find a way to make it happen.
Well, so many of my memories are passive memories too. You don't realize you're getting told a story or learning about them because you're in an action. You're doing something, whether it's hitting wiffle balls in the front yard or digging in the garden or whatever it is. If it's a scheduled 2 o'clock call every Saturday afternoon, you check the box.
Yeah. I remember going to my grandparents, and particularly when I hung out with my grandma, we'd crack walnuts and then grind them, because she'd bake with them. And it's such a monotonous task. Like, why are we doing this, And then we'd bake cookies and, nothing that I wanted to do. But, there was, stories being told at that time. And that is ingrained in my head. And I don't think my kids have went over to Grandpa and Grandma's on either side of the family and baked cookies or done any of that stuff. I mean, they might go to a playground. Mm-hmm. There's glorified babysitters at this point, I guess.
think there's an orientation issue, and without that, Granddad sits there and he never leaves. The thing that you and I, all 3 of us are in right now, is the to-do years of our lives, where we're just I got to get this thing done and this thing done and this, and we don't have any hobbies. But the reason we don't have any hobbies is because we're so wound tight. Well, when you're 65 or so, when you reflect and you let that go, all of a sudden you're like, actually, I did always want to take a vacation. Well, why didn't we take? Well, we couldn't take a vacation because we had crises, but now we don't have crises.
Isn't it backwards, though? We are in our prime right now of, being able to be physically able to go enjoy things and go do stuff. And, and then you get to that point of 65 plus, which there's a lot of healthy that way. But, I look at my dad, he's had surgeries on knees and shoulders and all this, stuff. And, he can't physically go golf all across the country like he would have when he was 35. He loved golf. He can't do that now. I feel like we're back asswards. Same thing with the education. I heard you guys talking on the Ag Tribes report of Tanner said you need to go to college, and you're I think it's just all about partying, which is kind of important to a somewhat of a social thing. But I always said I wish I could have went to work for 4 years and then came back and known what I wanted to learn, and I would have been just an assassin of learning.
My in-laws had a foreign exchange student from Italy. And the reason you get so many foreign exchange students from Italy is they are forced to take 2 or 3 or 4 years off after high school, after they call it completing university, but whatever that gap is. And so that's why most of them come to the U.S. as a foreign exchange student, is they come and they do their senior year of high school. They're already done with school. This is their time to go explore and do everything before they pick what avenue they want to go into and actually complete their further education. I thought that was a fascinating theory because, my wife went back to get her master's, and she had a better grade point average during her master's program than she ever did during regular college because she didn't care, didn't have a why. She went back
chasing you.
Right. I was already caught. Are you kidding me? I did the chasing. I wasn't going to get chased.
You don't need to beg.
I don't need to beg.
She didn't need to beg you.
No, she didn't have to ask for my attention. No. She got it. Demanded it. But
let me just say this real quick about your wife. Tanner's got one of those wives that when you're flicking through on Twitter, you're like, wait, that's a beautiful woman standing next to Tanner. What is going on?
I pay her a lot of money. It was mail order. She listens to every show too, so
No
I wonder if
comment.
she's gonna catch
No
that.
comment. I'm just not even gonna go there.
You're just gonna let that one lie?
Allie knows about her and my relationship. I don't need to solidify that.
Yes, I do have a very beautiful wife. I got very lucky.
Shockingly beautiful.
Yeah, she just needed somebody that was halfway sane, and I fooled her.
She's a good girl.
Yeah. But it's an interesting demographic right now that goes through college, and we don't know where we're going. Very few people at 18 know what they want to be when they grow up.
This is changing though now because, and I've seen it firsthand. I mistakenly said none of my employees went to college. One of my employees went to college. The rest of them didn't. And like, there's no shame about it. There's like, it's not like when they get together with other kids that are in college now, they don't have to worry about like, oh, like when I was in school, if you weren't in college, it was kind of like, oh, you didn't go to college. Huh?
Yeah.
My
That's
not
high
the
school
way.
my
You're
high
a
school
stoner.
graduation ceremony, if you didn't go to college, you put yourself as undecided in the program. Everybody's like, I'm going to Iowa State, and I'm going to AIB, and I'm going. If you weren't going to go, you listed undecided because that didn't mean that you weren't going, just for the fear of being judged.
I didn't bring this up during the Ag Tribes report, but you said I think people in Ag should go to college. The point that I think is the turning point in our university system, we were probably all in college about the same time, was when they said you can no longer discharge your student loan debt as in bankruptcy. At that moment, they created an instantaneous bubble because it meant that the borrower for college was a zero-risk loan. If you can get that kid to go to college and take out a loan, you 100% are going to get paid back on that. They can garnish your wages. It's stronger than even child support. And once that happened, now you watch the ballooning of the administrative group. And so I think if you could take a year or 2 years and just work some bullshit job and then figure out what is it that I need to learn and what is the most cost-effective way to learn it, you're going to be better off. But I didn't have that idea formulated when you brought up the...
We went to Branson on a short family vacation this summer. Nothing elaborate or whatever it was, but there's a gal that led us on the zip line. And I always thought, that's cool, right? She's free-flowing, hippie-ish, just living life, whatever it was, too. We came back the next day, and she was the one on the ropes course. No, she was doing a job. She just found a job that she can enjoy, but she gets to meet people every single day and learn perspective, and you are stuck with her for 12 zip lines. I mean, you spend an hour and a half with her. She gets to learn about you. I mean, she was doing it right, because I know that there's people in those jobs that deal with the public and people that just hate it and dread it. But she wanted to know what we were up to and why we were there and how we figured this out and where we're from, and that was pretty cool. I'm sure she was getting more value out of it that maybe she didn't realize, but it was certainly caught my attention.
Well, the last thing I have before I want to let you go is I'm genuinely interested in how you got set up with Zach and Stockcropper and all that. Like, that's what we're going. We're all going there Saturday or in 2 days from this recording. It'll be long past after the show comes out. But, yeah, how did that come about?
So that started, your audience probably knows about Jason Mock, who's this guy that does a bunch of weird farming, right?
And to preface, we've had Jason and Stockcropper on. We've had them both on as past guests, so they do know this.
And so Zach asked me during COVID, hey, I'm going to do this field day, and I want you to come talk. And I was like, all right, that'd be fun. I know this guy, Jason, a little bit, and a couple of my buddies, the Ring brothers, were going to go. And so we all hopped in a car and drove there and did it. And I met Zach there, and we were just joking about it today. He was wholly unimpressive. I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything after meeting him. But another one of our joint friends, this guy named Keaton Kruger, who's we call him a node runner. He just connects with everybody, talks with everybody. He was like, I think, Zach, you need to meet Vance. And he just kept poking us until we had a phone call. And that phone call led to me inviting Zach to do a podcast. And that podcast led to Zach having his dad do a legacy interview. And that legacy interview led to me going to his field day last year. And he may not even be on any of this stuff.
He's
he is
not
like,
a rapper
no.
in the UK?
He
What
is
about the
the
Chutera
least
one
interested
right
in
above that?
social media you could possibly be.
On LinkedIn.
He works for Truterra. That's what that's
No
his right
crap.
there. Yeah. So
Okay.
That's a partner of ours.
he's a fascinating guy. Yeah, and Keaton and I don't even know how we met, but he's one of those people. He might hate to hear me say this, but like on the spectrum, cannot help but tell you like, no, that idea is wrong. That is incorrect. That I don't, and like so I love being around Keaton. And if Keaton ever says you should meet this person, then I'm like, all right, there's signal there. So
That's cool.
Keaton Kruger is one of the most interesting.
And so will he be there?
He will be. He'll be. Yeah. There's so many people that are going to be at this stock cropper field day. It's going to be awesome.
I'm
We
looking
should
forward to
take
it.
business cards.
What? Yeah, you think? You think?
There's going to be a guy there named Wes Carney who used to work for John Deere. He's an engineer, and he's got all these ideas on the design process and how do you create new equipment. And just neat guys.
I knew this was going to be a long episode, which is awesome. Makes me happy. But we close every one of our episodes with the same question periodically. You've answered payoff questions before, but the question that we're running through right now is, how have you been balancing work and personal life? Work and family time.
And he doesn't like the word balance. It's juggle.
Juggle?
Because it doesn't have to be
I hate
balance
that.
on the scale.
Correct. It shouldn't be. It should not be a 50-50. And I don't care what way you think. It shouldn't be 50-50.
Can be.
So this is something I think about all the time. I hear people in legacy interviews talk about, did they miss too much time with their kids or were they happy with how much they worked? And it's not what you see on TV. There are a lot of people that sit with me in a legacy interview and say, no, I am happy with how much I worked. I needed to work. The family needed it. And so that makes me feel better when I'm away from my kids. But that is right now the highest pressure thing in my life. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And like yesterday, I had to leave work at 3 o'clock to try and take my daughter to gymnastics, and then afterwards make dinner, and then play with them and do all these things. And I sit there and wonder, is it better for me to be playing with them, or is it better for me to be able to secure their future? And I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you that my 4-year-old, when she goes to bed at night, she asked me to tell her stories about when I was a little boy. And she's not going to ask that question forever. And so I guess I'm trying to front load as much as I can time with them now, because the time with them later, they're not going to want as much or won't be as valuable.
Yeah. My experience with the girls at the age that my girls are at is you've got a couple of years and they get more and more fun. I haven't reached that stage with my daughters yet to where they resent me or, oh, Gabby's almost finding me embarrassing, but I am a pretty embarrassing guy.
Yeah, you're very embarrassing.
So it gets better and better and better, and I'm fearful of the day that it turns out to be, disassociated, or they don't have any interest in thinking their dad's cool anymore, or how that works. So it's an interesting question. It'll be cool to put a compilation episode together with the answers.
I wonder how you stop that. Is there any way of stopping that you're out of it, or is that just a phase? This is going to be from 13 to 19.
I don't know. I've seen those people that say that they gave birth to their best friend, and I'm like, that's a weird relationship.
Is that the way
too.
that you should be parenting your child?
Yeah,
too?
that's a weird.
Yeah.
I've heard it before said that all boys and their fathers go through the same 3 transitions. You idolize your father, then you resent your father, and then you understand your father. And I think, like, if I can get to that understand. I mean, I don't know, once I had kids, there were a whole lot of things about my dad that I was like, oh, you don't need my forgiveness for that. I get it now. You were not in the wrong. I was the one in the wrong. And I wonder if that's a phase that you go through with your daughters or not.
If that's the case, then I'm very fortunate, because I don't feel like my resent phase was very long.
Did you have one?
There's probably times around money, when I was working hard, but it was, I viewed it now as, looking back, that was a way of teaching me to work hard.
Yeah.
Go get it. Go do this. You put in the effort in, and you get rewarded for it, when some of my friends were just getting an allowance. Well, that wasn't the way and I was probably resent in that phase of, why don't you just give me money like everybody else? But I can't think of anything off the top of my head more than just that.
Right.
So, yeah, probably very fortunate.
Then you would have went out to California and got on public radio and Mendocino.
Fair point.
Right? And then you would have to learn on your own.
That's right.
He taught you a good lesson.
He did. What about you?
On the balance?
Resenting
On
your
resent.
dad.
Oh, on the resent.
Vance is good. He's got it.
I don't think that it was a resent towards my father. I think I lived on the farm growing up, and I resented that I couldn't see my friends. Like, all my other friends had bikes and lived in town and were able to go, and all I heard every week during school was, oh, we got together and went and played this game at this, whatever. And as soon as I was old enough that my parents would let me ride the 7-8 miles of my bike to town, luckily we had a bike trail, it wasn't on the roads. And I went there and did that, spent a few weeks there, going on the weekends and stuff, and come back like I wasn't missing that much. So it was a very short phase, but I do vividly remember it. Like I remember telling my mom and dad, like, I don't want to farm. I don't want to live out here isolated. My friends are all in town. I want to be with my people. I want to be with my tribes.
With your tribe.
Yeah. But then all I needed was a license. Then I could just go see him whenever I wanted.
Yeah,
and
you
then
didn't have to put 7 miles of work into
So,
it.
like, give me my license when I'm 14 and pissed off, not. Yeah. So.
That's good.
Yeah, it was. But there was a time I did not want to farm for a while.
You guys, this podcast is a blast. I wish I was this relaxed on my podcast. I'm not. I think I'm going to take away a lesson of, like, hey, there's a way to get this sort of relaxed. You guys made me feel totally at ease. It was a lot of fun.
Tanner needed it because his content sucked before he got to the Farm4Fun side. I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. Content was great. The delivery was
You
super
asked
proper.
us. Just wait till this episode is done. You asked us what we were writing down. I'll show you. It's just interesting to see how everybody analyzes things and what they think.
Mine
about.
were legit questions, and I will shut this and never look at it again. And those are actually probably going to be emailed to someone to have shorts made and all that. Things that he saw was interesting.
Yeah.
That's good. All right.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming up. I know we talked about it, 6-8 months ago, coming up and seeing the studio. I'm glad that this is the timing that we had. I always enjoy talking with you, and I think that that's no secret. Obviously, it's been a pleasure of ours.
This has been a wild good time, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. How often have you got to eat Casey's pizza in a Casey's?
Well, and I got to just eat the cheese off the
Yes.
That was great.
That's right. Okay, so for our listeners, if they don't know who Vance is, how do they find you?
You can find me on X at Vance Crowe or legacyinterviews.com or, of course, the Ag Tribes Report, which you can find on the Vance Crowe podcast.
All right, that's perfect. Thanks again for joining us. Corey, what do you tell the listeners?
A crack cold one. You deserve it.